Welcome to Bluegrass Brooklyn, our podcast all about the music we love, straight from the Bluegrass borough of Brooklyn, New York.
I told her that I loved her. She said, I love you too. I could tell she didn't know the love.
Hi, thanks for joining this Monday edition of Bluegrass Brooklyn. I'm your host, Michael Wilner. Today we have a fascinating panel discussion with three music educators, Austin Scelzo, fiddler extraordinaire and educator and winner of the 2025 Momentum Award for Industry Involvement by the IBMA, Matt Curley, who is a public school band instructor for middle school kids up in Darien, Connecticut, and our very own Liz Wolfe, who is a certified Warnick jam instructor. So we'll hear their perspectives on all aspects, music education, from teaching kids to the value of music theory to how to best get and motivate people to learn music. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Please remember to follow us at Bluegrass Brooklyn, Brooklyn spelled BKLYN, on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Also, you can visit us at bluegrassbrooklyn.com. If you're looking for jams, please go to bluegrassjamsnearme.com. And we really hope you enjoy the discussion. So let's roll. Well, welcome everybody to a panel discussion. We're going to be speaking with three music educators. Let's introduce them one at a time here. First of all, you all know and love Liz Wolfe. Liz, you're a Warnick. Liz, you're a certified Warnick instructor.
Correct, I am.
Yep, and that involves teaching adults and sometimes kids how to get involved with jams and so on.
Also, sometimes a vocal coach and band coach.
Right. Okay, great. And Austin, both you and Matt have backgrounds in music education in schools.
That's right. Yes, we were both we met at the Darien Public Schools because I was teaching orchestra and he was teaching band all middle school. So we studied music education as our undergraduate degree.
So first, Austin, you've moved on and now you are involved with all kinds of other stuff, including still a lot of music education, which you're well known for.
Yeah, I caught the bluegrass bug gradually, and during the time that I was a school teacher, I taught my first Warnick method class in 2019. And all those folks got together to jam every week after that class. So it just got me really psyched to bring my, background in education to the bluegrass world. And so I kind of took that and ran with it and built a career out of it.
Very cool. And Matt, you still are teaching in the public school.
I am. I'm still I'm in my office after school today, teaching the Darien Public Schools. I'm a middle school band teacher. I work with the high school too. So I teach all the non-bluegrass instruments by day, but then I do a little bit of bluegrass teaching. I help Austin when he runs his camps, and I'm mainly a bass player.
Okay. So you've thus far avoided introducing the recorder orchestra?
I used to teach elementary school, and I did 2 years of recorder, and I don't want to go back.
I wonder why.
Okay. So let's start off here. The first topic we'd like to address is how to teach people to get involved with and jam effectively, and ultimately how to become good and effective song leaders and maybe even jam leaders. People show up at jams and sometimes wonder why they feel out of step or their song doesn't go anywhere off like they would like it to and things like that. And I think we learned, because there's a set of skills involved there. So Liz, why don't we start with you? If you had to tell me, new jammer Mike, the 2 or 3 most important things you'd advise.
Okay, and so for me to clarify, so what are some things you need to learn to get going successfully in the beginning?
Yep.
The first thing you need to know and learn is that you're not the worst person in the room, even though you think you're the worst person in the room, probably. It's more about willingness to jump in and participate. And that is how you will learn the fastest, is to get in there and lead songs. I see so many people passing, which is, you're right, you're allowed to pass, but you won't get any better at leading a song or trying it out unless you do actually lead a song.
Austin, you've encouraged many, including myself, to not skip calling a song or taking a break, or as a fiddle player, introducing a song, kicking it off. What do you do when people are just like shrinking violets and they just don't want to, but aren't able to get over that shyness?
Well, I think it's connected to this overarching problem in education, which is that it's very focused on learning the instrument as opposed to building musicianship. And, this is true in private lessons. It's true in the way that, the systems of public education. I think it's very teacher centric, and it's very learn how to play your instrument and learn your role, in this very specific kind of setting. So giving people skills outside of that is part of building the confidence to feeling like they know what to expect and what is expected of them in those moments that they might be shying away. I mean, they might be shying away because they have absolutely no idea. They've only learned guitar on YouTube. They don't know how to make music with people. I think most people just think it's shyness or whatever, but it might actually be a lack of, the skills that they need, like knowing what key you're in and, being able to count off a song. I mean, I realize that in the public music school world, most of the time kids are never counting off songs. They rely on a conductor to count them off for them. So as soon as I started during the pandemic having the kids do little one-off music videos or collaborations with each other, there are smaller group projects, all of a sudden now they need to communicate in the way that you need to communicate in jamming, like how are we going to start the song? How are we going to end the song? And they're making decisions for themselves. So there's an overarching thing, I think, that, obviously on one end of your question, it's building confidence, giving people reps of feeling good and successful at easy things, to build up that. But there's also an element of just like gaining some of these musicianship skills.
So Matt, when you're in a situation where you're working with kids and less formally, it's not completely band structured, but it's more free form. What do you think the biggest challenges that they face in terms of getting in there and just being willing to flow with the jam?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't have any official like bluegrass ensemble here. I do have a few kids that are really into it that I'm teaching things, which is great. But the biggest parallel I have is my jazz groups. Here in Darien, we have a big, robust jazz program. And the three things I wrote down, which apply to all of our stuff too, is step one, the kids or adults that are starting to play have to learn to love the music first. If they're doing it just because they think it's cool to have a guitar or an instrument in front of them, but they don't know anything about the music, you can't go from there. So they have to be listening. They have to have a favorite artist. They have to have some songs that they love before they even start learning it. The second thing, which I do in my jazz band, is get rid of the fear of making mistakes. I mean, really, I pick up every instrument in the jazz band and take solos on it in front of the kids, and I'm making wrong notes all over the place in rehearsals. And the kids realize pretty quickly that nobody's throwing tomatoes at me for hitting the wrong note. So it's getting rid of that fear. And then I go down the line and say, you're taking a solo. And if they go, I don't know, then take a solo on one note. Who cares? Go for it. And then they random notes. And then after a few rehearsals, the fear is gone. And then there's that, it's like, okay, even if it's not great, I'm going to put myself out there. And then the third thing I wrote is learn more music. A lot of times in the public schools, it's really concert. Austin said teacher centric, and it is, but it's really a lot of concert, like performance centric, where it's like, okay, we have a concert coming up in 3 months. The public is going to see us. We're going to work on 3 songs. And then the kids learn 3 songs in 5 months. It's like, what I do is I'm giving 5 to 10 songs a week that I want the kids to learn the melodies of. And if it's in a bluegrass setting, learning more music is sometimes better because there's a lot of similarities in multiple songs. Whereas the fear and the overwhelmingness goes away when you realize there's 500 songs with 1, 4, and 5 chords in it.
Right.
And then you learn songs quicker, and that more comfortableness is happens. And I see that every day. Those 3 things help.
Well, as an example, when I was in the middle school orchestra, I learned one song, the New World Symphony. That was it.
It's wild.
We played that for 6, great piece of music, by the way, but we played that for 6 months.
Right.
Every bassoon solo and riff in that, but I wasn't exposed to a range, and never was I told, oh, you should go home and listen to this, that, and the other thing, just to hear it.
I mean, I'm teaching band, and obviously we're spending more time on a couple of pieces, but every one of my warm-ups we're sight reading a famous melody of a song, even if it's just playing it once. It's
Excellent.
getting more music in front of them.
Excellent. So back to jamming. Liz, tell us a little bit about the more formal or structured Wernick method that you're certified to teach.
Well, first of all, we're striving for a balance of instruments so that you get the full bluegrass experience. You get a mandolin and a banjo and a bass and a guitar, and there's harmony singing. So you're learning all the parts of how a bluegrass song is put together, which includes, of course, playing the chords together. How do you explain what the progression of the chords is? How do you choose songs that are going to be most successful when you start to actually play and lead a song? And then how do you give out the solos or the breaks in between? And what's a good balance between how much singing and how many breaks you give out?
Yeah.
Big hint, very few breaks, fewer the better between. And then putting it all together so that you get that balanced sound, dynamics of playing together, not playing too loud, making sure you can hear the singer and the instrumentalists as they're doing their solos. And in the classes that I do, I say that the goal is for you to be able to lead a successful song. And then we have to identify what is a successful song, all of which are the things I just described, so that people can let go. I love what you said, Matt, about the part where making mistakes. I think that's always people's biggest fears. They're going to get in and they're going to, it's going to be terrible. And so to be willing to keep doing it so you can make those mistakes, but just to see what mistakes to avoid. Don't choose a song that's got a 6 minor followed by a 2 minor followed by a flat 7 and then circle of fifths. No, this is not going to get you your win you're looking for.
I found one of the most unexpected but important skills I picked up in the Wernick courses I took with you, Liz, was how to end a song.
Mm-hmm.
People just don't know how to kick it and stop it and make sure that people don't either tag or don't tag or whatever it is you want to have happen at the end, how to cause all that to happen and conclude the song in a satisfactory manner. And everybody feels like, we started together, we ended together. That's great. Austin, tell us a little bit about what you hope to share with people at your January camp up in Ashokan this January.
Sure. Well, January is a Wernick method camp, and I've been teaching in that method since the first camp in, I believe, 2021. So this is year 4 or 5. And it's very much focused on a lot of what Liz touched on. So not a ton to add there, but I do want to piggyback off of kind of this overarching thing that we're discussing here that, Matt even referenced in his classes, which is this idea that, if you're playing, bassoon, or did you say oboe?
No, bassoon.
Bassoon. If you're playing bassoon in the band, you have, not only are you working on one piece for a really long time, but you're also working on one aspect of what makes that piece of music. And what Matt touched on, and also what Liz is hinting at, which is this idea of holistic musicianship. Knowing a song is more than just knowing this one little part that you're parting. It's knowing what the chords are. It's knowing what key you're in. It's knowing what the melody is, how to play the melody on your instrument. It's knowing how to accompany others when they're going to play the melody.
Lyrics.
And then, lyrics. These things are not touched on in the way that most music is taught. Even in private lessons, people learn to play the melody and they play the melody with their teacher or a backing track or whatever. I remember when I first tried to jam, as a classical person, I bought the book on like how to play bluegrass fiddle. And it was just a bunch of melodies written out in these very particular keys. And I remember the first time I tried to jam with a banjo player, it just didn't work, because we didn't have the language of how to start, how to end, what key I'm in, all that sort of stuff,
Right.
So I think the holistic musicianship is taught very well in the Wernick method, and it's starting to kind of make its way into the school systems. When I was a public school orchestra teacher, I love the thing that Matt mentioned. I did the same thing. We called them musical riddles, where they had to, in school, reading is a great skill. And I'm not making any statements about whether that's a skill that bluegrass people need, but they did read these melodies that were the melodies that they already knew, but they didn't know how to play them or what they looked like. So there were musical riddles in that they had to figure out the notes. And by the time they could play it successfully, they're like, oh, that's Blinding Lights or whatever. By the weekend, And they also learn to read lead sheets, which I didn't learn to read in school. I learned to read in college, which is the idea of the basic melody on one piece of paper, the chords above the melody, and the sheet music structured in a way that clearly shows you the parts of the song, like the A part, the B part, and the A part. That's not true in most band and orchestra music. They're more concerned with conserving the number of pieces of paper that they can put on a stand. So they compress things, and it's not structured in a way that makes you clearly understand form, which is a part of musicianship too. It's like understanding, okay, this is the verse, this is the chorus, and after the chorus, there's going to be solos. You don't really have a perception of that when you're, reading one part in a bigger whole, especially when that kind of conservation of paper thing is a part of what's going on.
Yeah, that's right. We're trying not to kill trees. Never mind whether you can follow the music or not. I get it. Let's shift topics a little bit and talk, because we're sort of gravitating towards it. Let's talk generally, or let's talk more specifically, I should say, about early music education for kids, right? Because the jam classes, I'd say 90% I've seen them, 90% are adults, I guess, if I was going to try and just guess a number. But let's talk about how we get kids into music and keep them in music. I'm going to start with Matt, because you are currently on the front lines of that activity.
I have a lot to say about that. And I've taught band education from fourth grade through college in different jobs. Right now I'm in 6th, 7th, and 8th. But I spent a few years teaching beginning band. And the typical method for teaching beginning band instruments is you get these method books. On each page, it has like 4 to 8 measure songs that are supposed to teach one skill. And you've got these 4th graders learning one note at a time, learning how to read it on the staff. And in my opinion, it is very slow, and the kids end up losing interest because they're not really making music. And it's a very bizarre way to teach it, because when we're learning to speak words, when we're learning to speak our English language, we're not learning how to read first. We're learning how to speak the language for years, and then we learn how to read in one word at a time in kindergarten, sentences in 1st grade, and we don't really fully read until end of 1st grade, 2nd grade. But in music, we're like, let's teach them to read first. And that's why a lot of kids lose interest. If we were to teach them how to play the instrument on a very easy level first, teach the notes, and then teach reading later, I think that it'd be much more successful. And now I say this, and it's hard to change a whole system of music education, especially in public schools when I have 225 students that I see every other day. So it's hard to change it, but I'm starting to try and change that and make them play more melodies and make them play more things by ear, so it's more enjoyable to play music from the bat.
Yeah, well, that is certainly something that in the Ornate classes is, if there's too much talking, you're always going to get...
Yeah, you're going to lose them.
Yeah, and so want to get people literally playing music right away.
Mm-hmm.
Pick something with 2 chords, G and D, and just start playing.
Liz, you do get some younger folks and kids in the Warnick classes, I think I've seen. How do you tailor your approach to them to get them engaged and interested in sustaining their music interest?
I think if there's usually teenagers, some of them are a little younger, but usually the ones that show up in the Warnick classes are more on teenager age. I think if you're a teenager and you show up to a event like that, you already have that love of bluegrass. Otherwise, you staying home and playing Fortnite or whatever they play. And so what I've noticed is that they can have really great skill because they're really great on the mandolin or whatever it is, but they're very reluctant to put themselves out there. I think that's pretty typical of kids in general, right? Is, to be front and center is to open yourself up to a lot more criticism. And so having the conversation with them that says, okay, if you ever really want to be playing, let's say in a band, like on the trail, or you want to really have that energy that you guys have, it takes a lot for you to stand up, play, get in there and have that energy. So I think that's that typical shyness comes with being that age.
Yeah. This goes back to something Matt and Austin were saying. When I was a kid, well, first of all, I took bassoon because the music teacher who was trying to put together a band had everybody choosing flute, clarinet, He said, anyone who takes oboe or bassoon gets an A.
So I still that same thing to get some instrument.
Tell him with the instrument, and I was pretty good, but my first time I sat in an orchestra, I got lost 3 notes in. And then when I finally caught up to where I was, I got lost again. And it suddenly struck me that just being able to play the music, play the notes on the page was only a small part of what I had to do. I had to be able to integrate with the group, be part of the team. I think, Austin, you used that term, being part of a team. And really understand my role. If worst comes to worst, listen for the basses because you're probably playing the same thing as them. Just all of that set of skills got me to the point where I was willing to tell duck jokes and get kicked out of the orchestra for a week. I was that comfortable. But Austin, what kind of programs have you been involved with or are you involved with that helps get kids involved in music?
Sure. Well, I mentioned I was an orchestra teacher for 4 years. I taught privately with mostly kids for 8 years or so.
Mhm.
And when I first quit my school teaching job, I wanted kids to still be involved. So my first program actually was a Bluegrass Country and Roots kids group. I've worked with kids a lot, and I think the first thing that I want to mention and piggyback off of Matt is the number one thing with kids is, regardless of the instrument they're playing, you have to get them excited about music.
Yeah.
About hearing music, about listening to music. And oftentimes, honestly, the way that I was taught music, I was actually discouraged from listening to music because I was taught that it would hinder my ability to learn to read.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very odd, but that's a common thing in the, traditional music education world.
Oh, yeah.
The thing is that kids are inspired by all sorts of different things. And the best thing you could do is I think in retrospect, what my grandparents did for me, which is to send me to camps that just had total multi-dimensional musical immersion. So I went to one of the first Mark O'Connor camps where every 40 minutes you have a 40-minute lesson with an Egyptian violinist and then a Scottish and Irish reel and jig player. And then you have a Argentinian musician who doesn't even speak English, who's kind of teaching you this sort of thing. And then you have a classical musician teaching you Passacaglia, and then you're learning a bluegrass tune, and then you're learning to sing and play the Beatles in another class, and then you're learning to chop and play rhythm on your fiddle. I mean, it was, for me, the first time I started practicing was actually because I heard some dude on TV playing rock riffs on violin, and he was playing AC/DC and Led Zeppelin, and I was like, I want to learn that. And I found the sheet music online, and I didn't have the skills yet to use my ear to learn that stuff. But the point is, it didn't really matter because I wanted it. And then I went from never practicing to playing for hours a day because I really was inspired. So I think the number one thing that any mentor, whether you're a public school teacher or a private teacher or whatever, can do for a kid is every time you see them, expose them to a different listening experience or some sort of musical experience, whether it's dance or listening or watching a live performance. You never know what's going to speak to a kid. And it was rock music for me when I was a high schooler, and then later fiddle music, and then later bluegrass music,
Mm-hmm.
And that phase is going to change for everybody's life. Is going to be this trajectory of getting really involved in one style of music and then maybe another thing and then drifting in and out. And so it's really about, for young kids, for them to be able to experience and hear different styles of music and see people who look different and sound different and dress different and think about music differently. People who are formally dressed up, people who are dressed in really casually, playing in, casual settings, all that sort of stuff is, I think, the most important thing for kids.
Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. I say this frequently. I say it at parent-teacher conferences. I say it to my administrators here at the school. My main job is to get kids to continue into high school band.
Yeah.
I don't care if they remember their scales in 10 years, but if they do high school band, that community's there, and then they have the opportunity to continue to fall in love with music, whether it's classical music, bluegrass music, whatever. But it's just that passion that I have is going to be infectious to these kids. I mean, I've got kids listening to bluegrass music now. Even though we're not playing it, they're obsessed. They're check out this Billy Strings video. And I'm yes.
Yeah.
And the biggest heartbreaking thing I see is public school music educators that don't play music anymore, don't perform it. And that is doing so much more of a disservice to kids because they're seeing this adult hate their job, wave their arms around, tell them to just read the music, not care about if they listen to, and that's such a heartbreaking thing. So I think more public school teachers need to just share what kind of music they love, even if it's not the same as what they're playing. All music is music, and it's going to be enriching to these kids.
Agreed. Austin, can you tell us a little bit about a couple of the programs you run or involved with?
Sure. I mean, right now I have mostly programs that are populated by mostly adults, I'll say. So I haven't continued that kids program. It's harder to get kids involved in extracurricular activities, I will say. Anything after school, especially in Connecticut, there's a big emphasis on college prep and sports and things like that. And so it's much more challenging to get kids involved. But I do try to stay connected to parents and encourage them to send their kids to experiences like I mentioned before. So because I didn't discover it till late high school, I feel really inspired to kind of just be a person who is a signpost and points parents in the right direction. And so there's these two resources that I just wanted to mention to help if people are parents or kids interested in any of that sort of stuff. I want them to be aware that I compiled all the different kids academies and types of learning experiences that you can have like in a summer camp music sort of immersion experience. Compiled those in a blog post that people can find if they search. I believe if they put my first name Austin in and then they search, summer music camps for kids, I think they should be able to find it just fine. And you might be able to put a link to that, in the description. But that's one half of it. And of course, the other half is funding for that, being able to make sure kids can get to those things. And so I have another blog post that's scholarships and grants for kids that are interested in learning traditional music. And that can help support private lessons, going to camps, covering even the costs of travel and staying and things like that. So that's a, primary thing I wanted to mention for kids. But the rest of the stuff is theoretically for all ages, but a lot of the attendees tend to be adults. So I have like a fiddle retreat in Asheville and in Florida. One's called Fiddle Heaven in Florida. And then the Creative Strings Academy in Asheville is kind of designed
in North Carolina.
Asheville, North Carolina. Yep. That's a collaboration with Christian Howes that I help string players learn to improvise and play different styles of music and things like that. And we mentioned January's Silver Bay Bluegrass Camp, Ashokan I'm involved a ton with, and that's a local area. If you're anywhere near New York or New England, that's definitely a place to check out as well.
I'd love to add the kids academies at some of these festivals. Those are huge, amazing. Yes. On the Trail, taught one at the Ossipee Valley Music Festival this year, and it was incredible. It was like 70 little kids. About 48 of them played ukulele. It was a great time.
IBMA puts a lot of kids on stage during the World of Bluegrass. By the way, I don't want to offend anyone. It's not Asheville in North Carolina. It's Asheville in Western North Carolina. Any local will quickly correct you. I do want to shift topics one more time.
Sure.
So I've become enamored of Cajun music. And when I talk to my Cajun music teacher, a guy named Mitch Reed, he's amazing, a great fiddle player. He plays.
I know him well, yeah.
Okay. So he says the guys he learned from didn't even know music theory existed. They just played what sounded right, because you're always droning on a string and you're always, and the tunes are pretty simple, but you got to be droning on the right string. It's usually guided by the chord structure of the song. But these guys didn't know any of that stuff. They didn't read music. They didn't know chords at all. They didn't know chord structures. Some of them weren't even in tune. Their instruments weren't well tuned, and they adjusted for that with their fingering. They just kind of played. So that's one side of it. That's sort of like the folk tradition doesn't admit theory as part of what they focus on. But I find that a lot of bluegrass musicians I interact with purposely avoid, or kind of are intimidated by, purposely avoid, or simply don't want to learn music theory. So the question to the panel is, music theory for bluegrass musicians, good or evil? So I'll start with you, Liz.
Well, when I started playing bluegrass music, I only had theory, like we've discussed, was taught. I knew how to read music. I could play piano a bit. I knew what chords were. I knew enough through it. And if you had said, what's a flat 7 or a 6 minor, I would not have known what you were talking about. But I still had a really, really good time. I was mostly playing the ukulele so I could strum along.
It's a gateway instrument.
It's a great gateway instrument. And Pete Wernick, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry, but it's a great gateway instrument to get people in. And so for whatever reason, probably because of my singing, people had me come in, and I learned through constant exposure. I sort of picked up on things. But then my pandemic project, like other people made sourdough bread. I grew up on a farm. I already knew how to do that. I went up to City College and I enrolled in their popular music program. And it's very theory heavy. Like it's basically theory, the whole thing, which was really, really interesting and really, really helpful and hard. I learned a lot. And now when I'm at the jams and someone says flat 7 or flat 3 or a 6-minor, I know the concept behind it,
Right.
which makes communicating easier for me. I understand when they say it's a mixolydian or whatever it is. So at least I have a solid understanding of where we're trying to go with the music. And it
Right.
helps me.
Right.
But I was having a lot of fun before I knew any of that stuff anyway.
Yeah, interesting. Matt, what, if any, music theory do you impart to your students, and what do you think its value is to them at that sort of relatively early stage?
I think that any bluegrass musician that is being part of a jam knows more about music theory than the average high school senior in a really good band program.
Huh.
You already understand chord structures, and you're going to know intervallic relation. You're going to know what intervals are because you know like what an arpeggio is just from the nature of playing a string instrument.
Right.
And, I mean, I know kids who make it into the all-state orchestra on a clarinet that would have no idea what a 4-chord sounds like.
I just have to interrupt because I did spend from early junior high school through the rest of my life playing mostly woodwind melody instruments. I couldn't tell you a 4 from a 5 from a 1.
That's what I mean. And I think like a big, huge part of music theory is ear training. And being part of anybody who's gone to music education college knows how tough that class is. And I think if you are jamming, bluegrass jamming is essentially an ear training class. You're having to figure out what note to start the melody on singing. You have to figure out where that melody starts on your instrument. A lot of the fiddle and mandolin and guitar, everything's based on the circle of fourths, circle of fifths. So I feel like bluegrass musicians have a leg up on the typical classical musician.
Whereas most of them will say, I don't want to learn.
Right. They know more than they think. They could start, if they learn how to read basic music, they're going to be acing a music theory 1 in college, no issue.
What do you think, Austin?
I think that it depends on a person's goals. So what music theory does, here's the biggest thing it does. I think it helps people communicate music better. So it's helpful for a band leader, especially, to know, or an arranger, or, any, person or teacher, especially. You have to have a language to communicate these things. And it also helps you in some ways appreciate and experience things a little bit more deeply because you kind of understand the inner workings, and there's an extra level of mysticism behind, like, wow, he used this chord over this word and that kind of like painted it in this really beautiful way, or played this thing that was really mean, and it's from totally outside of where you expect it to be. So it can kind of add an extra layer of appreciation. But the biggest thing is being able to communicate music. And so I just want to comment, what Mitch said about Cajun fiddling, which is the same for Irish and Scottish and old time fiddling. Your role in that is to play the melody and to, do variations on the melody. And there's some improvisation involved, but it's melodic based improvisation. A lot of those musicians have trouble communicating what key they're in or what the form of the song is in. Yep. They might not need that for those settings where you can just, a lot of those players will just like Cajun players will just start playing the tune and everybody gradually joins in as they figure it out, And so there's no necessarily need for that information in those settings, just as there's not a need for a lot of this if your role is to play bassoon in a band, or a trumpet in a band. Now it might, if you know theory and you do the same thing, you're still playing your role in the orchestra, it may help you appreciate what's going on around you and how your part fits into the whole. But what I mean to say is I don't think theory is necessary to experience music or to play music. I know I play with, Joe Dietz is the banjo player. He was the banjo player for Joe Val. I mean, just when he was my age, he was touring the world playing banjo with one of the most famous bluegrass musicians from New England. And to this day, he's been playing for all this time, and he's just a monster player. He has all the sounds in his head, but the music theory thing does not make any sense to him.
Interesting.
Not a bit. And I think that can happen in really any genre of music. It depends on your role, though. I think you don't see as many band leaders, the ones that are, having to communicate how a song goes and things like that. Those people usually have some sense of music theory. And historically, you had a bunch of musicians who had untrained ears that were in the band, and there was usually one or two guys in the band that would teach. If you look at the history of harmony singing in bluegrass music, it was often people like Pete Wernick himself shared that he struggled singing harmony in the beginning, but he had an experienced musician in the band, just like, Bill Monroe was this person, Jimmy Martin was this person who would teach the people on the road, all these hours on the road, he would teach the other people the harmony parts. Now, if those musicians knew music theory, they could figure out their own harmony part. They wouldn't need it to be taught to them, So it's not a necessary skill, but it's a helpful skill.
Okay, great. So let's conclude like this. I'll ask you each one quick question. And it's going to be, if you could give one piece of advice to the would-be music educator, what would it be, Matt?
Definitely share your passion, continue playing your instrument, whether it's professionally or just sharing it, and teach your kids to not be afraid to make mistakes, because that's how you grow.
Great. Austin?
I would piggyback on the idea of being a model yourself of a person who loves and is excited about music. People often say that in retrospect or in a reflection on, say, a feedback survey for like January. People will say that Austin's like enthusiasm for the music, my, love for it shines through in the way that I interact with it and the way that I talk about it and the way that I, play all the different instruments or whatever and learn all the different parts and just want to be a part of the whole and make that kind of community thing happening. So I would say that's the biggest thing for me.
Liz?
I would like to say to music educators out there that children hear words very seriously and take it with them into their adulthood. And so anything encouraging and participatory that you can share, whether it's your love of music or encouraging something or just figuring out what part of music is most impactful for them, will be the best at keeping people's interest or keeping kids' interests into their adult lives.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. This has been enlightening for me and a lot of fun. And I hope it's going to be as much fun for our listeners. And thanks a lot. And we'll see you around the jam circle at some point. Wow, that was interesting. First of all, we want to thank Matt, Liz, and Austin for joining us and sharing their views on music education. We're going to take a little break. We're going to be off on Christmas, not going to publish a show. So both Liz and I want to take this opportunity to thank all you listeners for listening to and commenting on and responding to and enjoying the podcast. Please remember, follow us at Bluegrass Brooklyn, spelled BKLYN. Please also subscribe to and comment on the podcast. And if you have any comments or you'd like to see a particular topic or us to find a guest or whatever, please send an email to mike@bluegrassbrooklyn.com. I guarantee you we will respond. So thanks again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you around the jam circle.
Where do we go from here? Can we work out all the pieces?